All right, perfect. We're live. Matt, we'll just wait for a few people to roll in since the LinkedIn algorithm sometimes takes a little bit long to notify people. Same with YouTube. Are we streaming to both of those?
We are.
Do we change the titles on those or not?
Yes, we did.
Oh, perfect. You're ahead of me, man. Damn, Nick.
I told my mom what we were doing. She said, my mom's 88 years old. She said, "You mean you're going to be live on the radio?"
That's awesome. It's like my wife's grandma. I tell my wife's grandma about Amazon and what we do, and she always used to say, well, that's kind of like Swap Shop, where I get on the radio and I call them and somebody buys my washing machine out of my garage. Like, yeah,
unfortunately, I remember that.
Yeah, kind of is like Swap Shop, I guess, if you think about it, except a lot of technical stuff involved.
Yeah, that's AM radio too.
It totally is AM radio. Somebody from Sheboygan will go to your dairy farm and buy your 1979 Buick LeSabre, right?
Yeah.
Because I heard you on Swap Shop.
And I got an old piece of carpet I'll throw in that you can have with it too. For free.
You can have everything in the trunk. All right, Nick, how are we doing over there?
We got 20 people up.
It's 20 people in, so we'll start the conversation.
You 20 people, bring somebody with you next week.
What's that?
You 20 people, invite somebody to come with you next week.
Yeah, no doubt. And as we're having our rate of views and the amount of time they watch these videos is pretty big. I know on one of the YouTube channels we put it on, a couple of ours have had over 1,000 views. And on LinkedIn they have, so between LinkedIn they get 2,000 or 3,000 views a piece, right? And for a long period of time, which is great. And there's people calling to complain how stupid I am. So that actually really means that we're actually adding some real value, Matt.
Yeah, I had a guy the other day that sent me an email from his anonymous. It was like a Gmail account, and I'd never heard of the guy before. So and he talked about all my blathering or blithering statements that when I used lumber cartel. So he sent me the definition of lumber cartel. I said, well, according to your definition of lumber cartel, I'm more sold on the idea now that there's some collusion going on than ever before. And so I didn't know. I said, are you in the lumber business or what? He didn't answer. So I linked in him to find out who he was. He had one contact that was that he and I had in common on LinkedIn. So who was a subscriber, just happened to be a Canadian mill. So I emailed the mill. I said, do you know this guy? And he said, yeah, he works for me. And he went and greened him a new one for trying to sneak in. He said, I don't mind you giving your opinion, but don't try to sneak it in on your private email.
So I think we got people in. I got the 2 cups working, the coffee cup and the MX cup.
Nice.
And I apologize to everybody yesterday with Matt and Greg. We had some technical difficulties and some other things. And with the lack of some people in the office on vacation, we just decided to do a short one. But I'm looking forward to this one with Matt. So welcome to Materials Exchange, the digital way to buy and sell lumber. This is one of probably our 20th show, just about, if not over that. Matt and I have lunch with Lumberman. We talk about the market and talk about Matt's Layman's Lumber Guide. And before I shared a story with Matt, I was going to tell him kind of an update of the market. We all have an idea why we're here. Prices go up very high because people have to stay with it, and they have a fear that they're not going to be able to, and there's not going to be enough. When everybody at once comes to the conclusion there is enough lumber, which I personally think there is right now, it falls off. There's other factors which we'll talk about. So a friend of mine, I was talking to him, a large buyer in the central part of the country. 3 weeks ago, this person was telling me, and they buy a lot of lumber, needed to buy the following week or 2 weeks later, but it never materialized, right? So I was on the phone with him the other day, and he said, he goes, what's interesting is we look at all of our purchasing based on a moving average of what we've done and what we think is going to happen, right? And at the same time, as this market climbed, people, buyers and companies, started adding more to their contracts. When I say contracts, they go to a mill and they say, I want to buy more lumber, guaranteed to ship it this week or this month. And I usually am 20% contracted. I want 50% contracted now, right? So anyway, the contracts go up. these contract prices are based on the spot market off the index. Get that? So what happens is any slight rollover in takeout or demand, even if it's slight, starts really pushing back. So what used to be 60 or 90 days is now 120 days, right? And so now he says, I may not buy until the end of the month or sometime in September. Are there psychological factors? Sure. But remember this, people are still taking lumber into their facilities every day now through contract lumber, right? And these contracts, which they thought were 50%, little pushback, maybe 60 or 70%. I'm being extreme here, but I think everybody gets the point. So while that happens, the spot market, what starts to build up because people aren't buying these big piles. They're running their piles down. And also, I think, this is just Ashley's opinion, a lot of people had high price lumber up and still do. And now nobody likes to do it because when I was a trader and was on this and had wood sitting on the ground, I always thought the market was going to come back to save me, right?
Yeah.
And what happened now is people have to take these losses and average down, right? And a lot of people need to move stuff. So, and then Matt, you kind of said, okay, this is what the layman lumber guy does, is it looks back, and we started a great conversation after that. What were we talking about?
Well, I was thinking about how the decision for those contracts is usually based on your most recent memory, and the forecasted decision points, which is my quote claim to fame, I guess. It's my single best indicator, is based on a 15-year history, a 10-year history, and a three-year weighted average. And the reason is the average length of time the average lumberman's been in the business right now is 17 years. The average lumber person is 45 years old, been in the business for 17 years. And that's based on my membership basis, my membership count. But they always remember back, somebody's got to say something about the spotted owl, or they remember back the great flood or the great hurricane or the great earthquake or whatever happened. That's in your mind about that can happen. But things beyond 15 years that may happen in your life, it's not really applicable to lumber. So it doesn't really influence your lumber opinions. But what happened in your recent memory is the most influential. And last year, the big boxes remember running out of treated lumber last summer and literally having no treated lumber on the shelves. So they vowed this year not to let that happen. And the builders vowed to make sure they don't run out of lumber either. So two things happened this year. The big boxes, specifically the two biggest boxes, overbought their treated lumber supply based on what they thought was going to happen this year because of what happened last year. And it was way, way wrong. And the same thing with the builders. The builders started the year realizing that they got short sheeted on the lumber supply last summer. So they told all their suppliers at the beginning of the year, whatever you do not run out of lumber. I'll pay any price. Price is not a problem. So basically the supply side of the industry had a carte blanche to just go out and say, like, let's load all the lumber up that we need that we can get, because our buyers are telling us we're going to take it at any price. And the home centers thinking that they were going to have the same thing happen with treated lumber. And it just didn't happen. And you were talking about percentages there. If you think about all it takes is 1 or 2% change in the sales production ratio to be overbought or oversold or oversupplied or undersupplied. So you don't need a big change. All you need is the mills just selling 95% of their production for a couple of weeks in a row, and their order files are gone. Well, consequently, if they sell 105% for 3 weeks in a row, then they've got a little order file. But then you start going times like this when people are really trying to radically reduce inventories and mills are only selling 60, 70% of their order file, then it just piles up in a hurry.
Yeah, no doubt. And one thing I've noticed too is, and I was telling you, and I won't say a name, I had a person call and say that I was inaccurate in what I was saying on a few things. Look, I'm just giving an opinion on things, but here's my opinion on the feedback that I see our lumber market gets from people on a regular basis. There is a bias by certain people that report stuff or talk about stuff to be pro, how can I say this?
Mill.
To be like, the price is falling now, so all mills are going to close. Like, well, why? Or the price is going up, and look, I guess what I'm saying is everybody. All I want to do is have an economy like have an economic look at something to make so everybody can make those decisions themselves instead of saying, "Oh, the price is below the cost of production. Now everybody's going to close," right? Or, look at things move because of supply and demand. We know there's costs up and costs down. Just because the price is down right now, I don't think that you're going to see there'll be. And I hope I haven't checked on the fire situation. I hope it's improving, and I feel terrible about that. Right, some of these mills are closing some stuff short term, but overall, business takeout is still pretty decent, and mills are in business to make lumber, not to not make lumber. And there is a cost to not making lumber, just as there is a cost to making lumber. So right now, my opinion is, I think mills are going to continue to make lumber, and I've seen down in the South more mills opening up. Right.
I've got a friend that's in the he's now a full-time futures trader, and I don't know how in the world he does that, lumber futures trader, but he's got 25 some odd years with being a mill sales in Canada and in the U.S. And he told me this week that he said it cost a mill $500,000 to shut down a mill, $500,000 to shut a mill down for 1 week. So they lose $500,000 a week just to the. They got a payroll, they've got to restart up. It's a real expensive endeavor to do that. And with the money that they've made this year, they're not gonna risk, losing a little. It's just a trade-off to sell the lumber at a loss versus what you're going to lose by shutting a mill down. But he told me, he said mills will only shut down when they run out of the absolute last space to put some lumber. That includes their yard, reloads, VMIs, every possible place to do it. And his expectation was we're close to that. And I said, what does close mean? He said, well, maybe end of September. I said, 7 weeks more of this? That's a long time for.
Look, I'm not trying to pick a side here. I'm just telling it. This. My dad used to always say when I hated this is what it is, right? There's so much outtake, and there's so much production, and there's so much consumption. And then there's everything in the middle with uncertainty that causes volatility. The point is, the market always determines what the price is eventually, right? And sometimes we have to remove the human emotion about why we feel this is going up and just look at the actual numbers, right? So let's bring up the first chart on this one, Matt. And I pulled this one off of your most recent publication. To take a look. So this is your 2x4. This is the overall composite chart, right? And it kind of looks like, we've had a few hitches along the way. Now we're down here. The big premium came out of the CME market to the spot market, and we're trying to sit here and figure out what's going on. Is there anything that you read into this chart, since it looks like we have over a historic, looking at the black bars, a little uptick that's supposed to happen?
Well, here's the thing that I want to reemphasize this again. And I know you guys have probably heard it. You hear it every time because I want to make sure nobody uses this the wrong way. This is a timing mechanism. So at week 31, it said a year in advance that something significant is going to happen at week 31. Now, it could have been an acceleration lower. It could have been a reversal. But what we can see what happened in week 31 was it was just a giant train wreck. I mean, that's when the bottom we found a 500 bottom on futures, and cash found a bottom around 450, and we got a little bump. Everything started to feel good. But then all of a sudden we realized that, well, we're trying to build at 1.7 million pace, but we've got some real problems at 1.7 million pace. There's enough lumber to build 1.7 million homes, but there's not enough windows and doors, and even we have enough labor to build 1.7 million because the starting pace is at 1.7 million, and we've obviously got enough labor and lumber to do it because we're doing it. But what's happening is the builders are having to pull back because they can't get windows, doors, and on the lumber side, there's one hurdle that we can't get over, and that's EWP, Engineered Wood Products.
Man, you said it. You let me sit down on that call with you, and I don't know how much I can share on that one, but that opened my eyes. That opened my eyes to you had one of your people on your call said they couldn't get 19 or 20 homes in the Midwest under roof because they didn't have the I-joist systems. Another guy said if we broke one I-joist, we couldn't replace it. And one of our users on Materials Exchange said they shipped from their truss facility in St. Louis, where they normally only go 200 miles max, 500 miles on floor trusses into Ohio because they needed them over there, right? So,
Yeah, right.
and I think there was a Wall Street Journal article out the other day talking about how some of these home builders are still busy, but they're not going out and starting stuff before they finish other ones. So,
Well, we saw that coming. We saw that coming back before the summer and called that ahead of time that they were a year out on order files and that they were just out of control. They had no way of determining what their price was going to be. So the builders intentionally started scaling back and not trying to reel that order file in. So we knew this was coming, but it doesn't mean the housing demand has slowed or anything's changed about that. It just means that the pace that the builders are trying to get things started as they're trying to slow it down a little bit. But still, if you look at housing starts, we're still clipping along at 1.7 million. So we're still trying to push 1.7 million through a $1.3 million hole, 1.3 million starts with products like windows and doors and EWPs. And right now, in my opinion, it's a huge opportunity for the floor truss guys, the truss industry that can add additional capacity for floor trusses. And even just building an inventory of 18, 24, whatever standard truss sizes for floors, and you can't really do anything for headers, I guess. But
Matt, I called around because we were thinking about adding some of those EWP to the system if people had extra somewhere. So I'm verbally calling around right now, finding where people like in Florida or California have extra or something, and then we can ship it a long way. So there's a potential thing there, but what came out of that call that you let me on is I thought the whole EWP thing was solved, right? And it still seems like it's an issue, but again, like you said, other things have to be ordered. So anyway, I think that is.
Let me tell you something I learned yesterday from talking to a small, probably the smallest I-joist producer. And he said, here's the problem. He said, we have an APA stamp, and that APA stamp requires that we have specific products to go into our manufacturing of our I-joist, which means our 2x3 has to be a 2400 MSR from a specific mill, or a couple of specific mills. And our web material, the OSB in the middle, has to come from a specific mill. This is a specific grade. So they can't just randomly go out and find 2x3s or OSB from random places. They have to get specific products from a specific producer, and they're limited just to that. So that prevents them from being able to just arbitrarily ramp up and make more of the product, because in order to keep their stamp, they have to stay within a certain parameters of their supply, which is keeping it limited. And that helps explain some of it.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And one of your you had a lot of smart guys on your call. It was and ladies in your call. It was a great call. And, one of the guys made a thing. He goes, "Hey, you know what? Maybe we're going to have to tell some of these production builders and buyers that you're going to have a partition, a load-bearing wall in one of your rooms upstairs where you wanted a great big run, or you're going to have some extra load-bearing posts in the basement because we can't make the 30-foot run that we wanted because we got to use solid timber, right?" So it was interesting. So the people are thinking about it, but it shows how it takes a while to change on that one. And James Breck just put, in Western Canada, residential construction pretty much shuts down at the end of October. EWP order files on roof trusses in some areas, 12 to 16 weeks. That wraps up the season, going to impact demand in Western Canada. Absolutely. James also said, "Thank you, Ash, so much for expressing the bias inherent in the system. Courage, bro." And, I'm just trying to say, I think one thing that people want to see in the lumber business, you got all this technology on the production side and on the end use side, but in the middle, we've got this marketing that's still 1980s, right? And it's a bunch of people talking. All I want to do is have people see the transparent information and know what's going on. That's it. I'm not trying to pick a side on anything.
I agree with you, but it's not going to happen. The transparency isn't going to happen because there's this giant wedge between producer and everybody below that, and then there's a smaller wedge between builders and the supply chain, the contractor yards. And it's almost like we're a culture that's built on, I'm not going to say being deceptive, but being less than completely honest. Because we know when a mill's talking about telling us they're for you guys in the future, when you start hearing a mill tell you they got their 6-week shipment, just make sure that you differentiate the difference between shipment and order file. It's not the same thing, and you get sucked in a lot of times into buying products that are further out shipment just because that's all you're offered. But that doesn't mean the order file's there. And I'm not trying to pick on the mills, but the marketing philosophy on the producer side is a whole different. It's a whole different school than the buy side, and it's just,
and they've got their own. I mean, I think there has to be a lot more equity on both sides, right? So the mills have their turn; they take in the box too, and they need to get good information back to them also too, right? Which I think we're working on. So again, to James, thanks. I'm just trying to create more equity in the chain for everybody to get the information so they can make their own decisions. I think Matt does that with this. So I wanted to bring up the Southern Pine chart too, Matt. That got a little bit of activity, it seems, in the last few weeks. And it seems to me some treaters started buying again, and the low trades came out of the market, and it started to at least low trades on some of the heavily treated items came out of the market. Are you seeing that at all?
I'm seeing it's mostly 2x4s. So
okay.
I think it's more trust related, because the treaters that are non-big box treaters are certainly staying active in the market because their guys don't have a lot of inventory. Their customers don't have a lot of inventory. But this has been predominantly a 2x4 rally. That's prices. If you look at those prices to the left over there, you can see that 2x10s or even the 2x12s are even down a little, which is pretty remarkable because 2x12s are almost one of the cheapest things on the Southern Pine list.
Yeah,
and it's still hard to it's still in big demand for headers and floor systems.
I used to have a buddy of mine that used to, whenever 2x12 got below the price of 2x4 relative to the futures, and he used to always load up warehouses with 2x12, and he'd sit on them for 4 or 5 months if he had to, because they were just cheap fiber, and 2x12 shouldn't be that cheap, right?
But there's not many of them. It's less than 5% of the 2-inch production, so the prices are cheap. But it's just because nobody's looking for them. But it would be easy for one major company, contractor yard, wholesale company, whatever, to sweep through the South and get all the 2x12s that are available and not even be loaded up with a bunch of it.
Yeah. No. The cool thing about 2x12 is as long as you put it inside, a lot of times it's so wide it stores a lot easier because of the actual size of it and the fiber. Let's look at let's go to the number 4 chart, the OSB chart, actually, because this is one that took a while and it was up there. And if you would have been on the Materials Exchange platform, you would have actually seen 6 weeks ago this thing rolling over because everybody was selling inventory they had at the retail level to get out of it. And now it's just kind of like falling off. And the interesting thing here, I was at a wedding up in Wisconsin this weekend. My brother-in-law just built a big building, and he built it like 6 months ago, and he has to buy like 200 sheets of OSB to finish it. He still thought OSB was $40 or $50 a sheet, so it still hasn't reached the general public yet, right?
Wow.
But it's that's a real interesting one because now it's starting to correct real quick, but there's been some liquidity on that one. Let's look at your framing package index also, because I'm guessing that had some pretty good adjustments in the last few weeks.
Oh yeah, particularly based on replacement costs, not the prices like you said that you see from your contractor or your contractor supply, because they haven't felt it all the way through yet. But the prices that they're paying are down. If you look at the May price of $38 a square foot, we're down to $14 a square foot, from $72,000 for a framing package down to $28,000. I mean, we're down like 60%. So that's encouraging for builders going forward. And I'm not a stock market kind of guy, but here's the thing you can kind of infer is that the builders tell me that most of this money that's coming back from the lumber is going into margins. So home builders are going to have a very good third quarter when it comes to profit margins on their stocks, because they're going to have fatter, especially in even fourth quarter, because their lumber packages are going to be so much less. and the price of the home is not coming down. It's still up there. We still have not hit a price rejection point from buyers on home prices. And we really never hit it on lumber either. We just bailed, just started paring it back, and we're just overbought at we were buying for $1.7 million, only producing $1.3 million, but
which is crazy, Matt, because like the state, my history in the lumber business, the movement of framing package numbers was always very insignificant to home builders, but we've come from such a big extreme that it moves the needle a little bit, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's become a focal point, one of the primary focal points. It's amazing to hear, like on that phone call that you had the other day with me.
Yeah,
those were all either small lumber dealers, and some of them were large. There was a couple of medium-sized home builders, and the most vocal person was one of the largest production builders in the country. And what those guys have learned about the lumber market in general, the education people have gotten about the lumber market in the last year has been phenomenal. People are so much more aware of how the product is.
So whenever you let me on one of those calls, I'm on, because what I learned from there was amazing. When you get feedback from the field with that group that you had, I don't think people realize how valuable that is.
It seems to be the things they say. They don't really talk about the price of the product. They talk about the movement of it and the accessibility of it. And what I really get a lot out of is what's your problem? What's your bottleneck now, and what do you see as the solution for it? And that tells us a lot about what we can expect out of the future of the lumber.
I was equating it to some of the guys here about this kind of stuff today. These guys, to me, I'm like sitting way behind the front line sometimes, and those are like forward observers calling in an artillery thing, because
exactly.
They're looking directly at what's going on, and I'm listening to them, and I just heard the way they were talking. Sorry, you can see I'm leaning in, getting excited about this. All I'm saying is, anytime you want to let me on that call, I'm on, because those guys are awesome. And it also showed the value of what you do and what people sometimes don't know, other things that you do at the Layman Lumber Guide, like running expert panels like this internally, that people, once they get into your orbit, can do stuff like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and anybody that's not familiar with it, I got a new website up. It's not my idea. It was my son's who told me it's time to start sharpening it up and looking like you're 2021 and not 1981. But if you guys are interested, I think I said this before. You can't buy my product without having a 2-month free trial. I want you to use it and see it and make sure you like it and it fits you, because it's not for everybody. It may not be for a little guy. It may not be for the super large guy who has a lot of information, but it's the memberships are limited to right now. We're limited to 300, and we're right there. So I'm not really aggressively seeking new memberships, but I welcome anyone to go to the website, take a 2-month free trial just to see it and check it out, and enjoy the ride for a little bit. And
yeah, but I just think sometimes people don't see that. James Breck, does anyone follow or record inventory levels at the dealer level? How long will the inventory reductions last? I would think this would be a good indicator for demand trends. Well, you have something on inventory in yours, don't you, Matt? Kind of like inventory levels?
I do a 3-week level, a 3-week inventory of where the mills are. The thing is, it's difficult to measure the inventory in the field, what's in the field, because that's based on, like you said at the very beginning, like people's inventories are based on what their history is. Let me back up. Most inventories are normally people carry about a 6-week inventory. And that's based on their previous experiences of how inventories are going to turn. But all of a sudden, if something happens, the market slows a little bit, then the 6 weeks becomes 7 weeks or 8 weeks or 9 weeks. And then when you've got 9 weeks of inventory and you stop buying, then your inventory starts to go down a lot faster. So you get these whiplashes in the market. And so right now, looking at the FDPs, you can see you can't possibly see any reason why the market would go up right now, because dealers have a lot of inventory, treaters have a lot of inventory, home centers have a lot of inventory, truss guys have a lot of inventory. They say they're stuffed to the gills. They can't put any more. Reloads are full. Mills are running wide open, balls to the wall. But all it's going to take is the bottleneck is on the builder end. It's just saying, don't bring me anything until you've got the EWP. Don't bring me any lumber package I'm not even going to, and quotes have gone on hold for major multifamily packages because the EWP can't get quoted. As soon as that EWP situation resolves and it gets a little loosened up, and I tried yesterday or this week to really get a specific answer, and the thing that's disturbing about it is the evasiveness of the people that can give you the answers.
Yeah.
So we saw the same thing about lumber in May. We thought there was just going to never be enough lumber, and all of a sudden it shows up that everybody's got it. And my suspicion is the same thing's happening with EWP, that those people that have it are hoarding it, and not necessarily hoarding it for greedy purposes, but because they don't see any end to it. And they're still making the stuff, and it's still coming out. It's still shipping by truckloads, but it's getting rationed out because we're trying to put headers and floor systems into 1.7 million starts, and we're not producing that much. But as the builders continue to reel back their starts, they're going to catch up, and it's going to be a slingshot. It's going to go.
Yeah,
it's going to be sharp reversal.
So everything you just explained to me from the old trading standpoint, what I think is we're probably, and this is just my opinion, when you're getting to a point where everybody's starting to lean to one side of boat, there's probably some good opportunity. Look at anybody that's bought in the last 2 months on the way down and tried to catch a falling knife, which is hard to do, has high priced inventory. So you got to be very aware when people are selling you stuff, they're long, and whether they're hedged or not hedged, probably have a high price inventory. It's just the way it is. But I know Greg,
this isn't the first time. This is the first time mills have been in danger of filling up their parking lot with lumber, and the reason that happens is because their customers' parking lots are filled up with lumber. And it's a temporary logjam imbalance of supply and demand, disproportionate distribution of the product, and it always shakes itself out. So this Tom Martin friend of mine used to say, the longer they don't buy, the more bullish I get.
Yeah.
So the more, like you just said, everybody's leaning on the same side of the boat. So the other side of the boat is empty.
Yeah. And like Greg and Matt Beamer, like Greg Riley and Matt Beamer always say all the time is, none of us know exactly what's going. We have an idea what's going on, but game plan. People like listening to this. What should you do? Well, look, if you have business sold and you can buy stuff here and make money on it. Again, my opinion, I don't see why you wouldn't do that and use this as an opportunity to go out and bid on things to get the best price you can, because I don't know when the market's going to turn, if it's going to turn, but if it does turn, you miss the first X amount of dollars because because when everybody changes their mind and goes the other way, it's gone. So what I always like saying is I like listening to Matt and Greg, what they say, and Matt here, have a game plan, know what you want to do, know what you don't want to do, have the ability to flex, have the information in front of you, and job of buyers and sellers, sell at the best price, buy at the best price, but keep your inventory moving as a seller, and you don't want to run out of inventory as a buyer. So James asked another question: how much in terms of starts do EWT producers have in capacity? Tough question, James. I don't know what that is. I would be so off on that one, but we can try to find that out for you.
My guess, James, is it's like about 1.3 million. Now that is 1.3 million assumes that nobody's building inventory and hoarding it somewhere. But we thought the same thing about lumber. We thought lumber was undersupplied in March, April, and May. We thought that it just wasn't enough of it. It turns out what was happening is people were building inventory. Like something else is happening now that has never happened before is developers are starting to buy this product and put it in warehouses that have never had warehouse storage before. So people are buying product for jobs that for 2022 they're putting the product in warehouses, and that's going to take demand away from 2022 when the contractor yards are expecting it's going to be coming. They're going to find out developers have already bought 50 truckloads of 2x6 studs or 50 truckloads of OSB, and they just bought it because like you just said, it pencils in, it budgets well. So just buy it, store it, pay $50 $1,000 for storage on it for 6 months, and know that you've got it and got these prices locked in, and don't worry about it. So I love this term. Somebody else coined. That's the shadow inventory that we never really kept an eye on for years. It's now, it's shadow inventory because it's inventory that the market never had before, because people normally never bought cars. They usually went through a secondary or somebody else are now buying stuff and storing it and providing the distribution function because they're so big at their own level, right? Yeah, and you realize it, and I didn't realize this before, but the money trail starts at the developer, where the venture capitalist is. Where those are the people with the money. They're the guys saying, "Wait a minute, so I don't have to be in the lumber business. I just have to be able to have some place that I can buy lumber and store it." And Materials Exchange is a perfect place to do it. You can kind of come incognito, buy a bunch of stuff, ship it to a warehouse, and just sit on it. And if you want to be sneaky, but
Yeah, no doubt. We're seeing a lot more people all through the chain getting on. So we're up against 40 minutes. So it was great conversation. Hopefully, and always, if you want to contact Matt, we'll bring up his new contact number with his website. There's laymansguide.com. laymansguide.com, and send Matt and I any requests and anything you want to talk about on these things. I mean, Matt and I like BSing sometimes, and we get going, but people seem to like it. So, but if you have any specific questions you want to talk about or go over next time, we can do that too. But I'm having a lot of fun.
And don't worry about being controversial either. That's encouraged.
Yeah, what do they say? Stress and friction are the only ways you can grow in life.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, everybody, everything's great. Appreciate you all showing up. We'll rebroadcast this on YouTube and on LinkedIn. If you need a copy of it, I'll send Matt a copy of our YouTube URL so you can see that. But again, love the interaction, and we'll all see you next week, same time.
Guys, have a great week. Thanks for coming.